Hi, this is a 3.2 Civil War summary video. If you haven't already, please go and watch the full-length video that's also linked on YouTube and Edmodo. Last time we talked about the causes of the Civil War and the lead up to the Civil War. Today we're actually going to talk about the actual Civil War and the strategies that were involved and some of the major turning points of the war. The Civil War started when the South left the Union. This was called secession. Lincoln's primary goal was to reunite the country. It's not to end slavery. That's a common misconception about Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War. I'll start discussing the Civil War by talking about the military and the geography of each side and talking about some of the strengths and weaknesses. The North did not have as strong of a military, but they had a lot more soldiers. The South, meanwhile, had strong military leaders, but they didn't have as many soldiers. So both sides kind of have an advantage here, as well as a disadvantage. Economically, the North had many advantages over the South. They had factories which could make products, and they also grew food. This creates a huge advantage for the North. The South, however, struggles because they really don't have a lot of factories, and they only grow cash crops. They face massive inflation because they don't have a lot of goods or food, and the Northern blockade hurt their ability to get goods from Britain, and a lot of the farmers are unwilling to stop growing cash crops to grow food products. So there are major economic problems in the South. In terms of politics, the North also has a large advantage here. They have a very strong leader in Abraham Lincoln and a very effective government. The South, meanwhile, had a confederation. If you're back to the Articles of Confederation, that confederations are never very effective. It's more of an alliance than a government, and the government doesn't have enough power to actually be effective. And that's true for the South and the Confederacy in this case. Their president, Jefferson Davis, is really weak and doesn't have a lot of power, and that's going to create a lot of political problems for the South. After looking at advantages and disadvantages, now we need to look at strategies. The North had the Anaconda Plan, which is a very strong strategy, and it's like an anaconda. They want to blockade the South and starve the South, and they do that by cutting off their trade from Great Britain. They also want to cut the South down the middle using the Mississippi River, and they want to capture Richmond. This is a very, very effective strategy. The South, meanwhile, knew their advantages, and they wanted to fight a defensive war. This is a very effective strategy for the South since the North has to bring the South back. And that's kind of what a war of attrition means in this case. If the South can just get the North to tire out from fighting, then they win. When they do invade the North at Antietam and Gettysburg, both of those battles end up as being failures. So their strategy of playing defense really works well for them. And if they would have kept doing that, the North might have gotten tired of fighting and given up, and that's what a war of attrition means. There are two major turning point battles in the Civil War. One was at Vicksburg, and what happened at Vicksburg is it was the last major spot on the Mississippi River. The North took it, and it cut the South in two on the Mississippi River. And that's exactly what their strategy was earlier that we talked about. And then Gettysburg, this is when the South invaded the North and went into Pennsylvania, and the North had a huge victory, and the South will never be able to recover because they lose so many men. After Gettysburg, the South will not have a chance to win this war. It'll be inevitable for the North to win. The last thing mentioned is Appomattox, and that's where the South actually surrendered during the Civil War. Some of the important people you should know are Robert E. Lee, who was a general for the South, and really a brilliant general who has a lot of success up until Gettysburg when he makes a big mistake. Ulysses S. Grant, who used total war, meaning like they'll fight and destroy whatever they need to do to win, and they'll fight every day if they need to win. Another is William Sherman. And he's famous for his march to the sea in the South, where he goes through the South and really burns everything down. And that's another example of total war. It's really going to cause the South to lose motivation to fight the war. A hugely important political document was issued during the Civil War, and that's the Emancipation Proclamation. It's kind of misunderstood, though. It does not free all the slaves. It only frees the slaves in the areas of rebellion. It's really more of a political document because what it does is it keeps Great Britain from joining into the war since they cannot support slavery. The 13th Amendment is what really ends slavery. It also allows, as the Northern soldiers, as they go through the South, to emancipate slaves as they're going through, but it doesn't free all the slaves. For example, it doesn't free slaves in Maryland, Kentucky, Delaware, and Missouri. Those states are able to keep their slaves because they're not in rebellion against the North. Another huge thing that it impacts is it allows African Americans to join the war effort. The most famous of those units that joined was the 54th Massachusetts Regiment from the movie Glory. Some of the important outcomes of the war, that more people got the right to vote, they opened up democracy for a lot more people, the Union's preserved, and the threat of succession was ended. No state will ever threaten to succeed again because they know the consequence will be civil war. The slaves are freed by the 13th Amendment, and the states' rights argument, which is still around, but it's really not as strong as it once was. This concludes the 3.2 summary video. If you haven't already, please go and watch the full-length 3.2 video. And please also go to Edmodo, take the video quiz, and turn in the notes guide. Thank you.